welcome to another episode of Mythic Drafting, where today I'll be taking a look at my top 10 picks for the best uncommons in the upcoming set March of the Machine. If you like this type of content and want to see my updated rankings once I've drafted the set, be sure to subscribe below. But now let's take my top 10 uncommons to draft once the set's released on Arena. The first one being Collective Nightmare. This is a 2 black instant with Convoke, and it has target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. This is just bread and butter, very efficient removal. It will deal with a lot of cheap creatures in the early game, as well as being able to shrink a bigger creature in combat so that your smaller creature can kill it without dying. This is not going to be absurdly powerful in every game. However, it's just an extremely efficient card, and the fact that it has Convoke means that you can cast it without having any lands tapped, which makes it difficult for your opponent to predict that you have it and allows you to continue casting spells on your main phase while leaving this up in combat and in your opponent's combat. It's not as powerful as some of the other 2-color uncommons, but if it were thinking about this in terms of first pick, this is a single costed card, it goes in every black deck, and you can never have too much removal. And for that reason, it's number 10 on my list. Coming in at number 9 is Artistic Refusal, which is 4 blue for an instant, also with Convoke, and it has choose one or both, counter target spell, or draw 2 cards, then discard a card. This card is very powerful, as it's going to be a 2-for-1 most of the time with card selection. So it's going to 1-for-1 when you counter a target spell, and then you're going to get to draw 2 cards and discard a card, leaving you up 1 net card while your opponent's mana has been spent and you've hopefully gained a tempo advantage. This does take a little bit of work to make it extremely strong, as it is a 6-cost counterspell, so it's going to be difficult to leave it up unless you've got a lot of creatures on the battlefield. However, if you do have a lot of creatures, such as in a blue-red or a blue-white Knights deck, then this card is going to surprise your opponents when you have 2 lands and 4 creatures and you counter that spell and you draw more gas to close out the game with. I think that it's going to be a pretty strong first pick, and if you do happen to get this in your packs, you should be looking to draft a lot of cheap creatures so that you can power this out in the early game. Coming in at number 8 is another 6-cost card, however this time without Convoke, in Phyrexian Gargantua. It's 4 black for a 4/4 Phyrexian Horror. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. Muldrifter has always been pretty good in Limited, and I expect Phyrexian Gargantua to be no different. You're going to get a 4/4 body, which is going to go wonders towards stabilizing the board, and you're going to then draw 2 more cards to ensure that you can take advantage of the body and hopefully close out the game with your card advantage. While the 2 life is a downside, I don't expect the format to be fast enough to make this unplayable, and if you're playing best of 3, I think you can always sideboard this out against really aggressive decks. However, I'm not sure you even want to be doing that. This card's just a house and a great reason to be in black, and I'm not going to be surprised that I first pick this card quite often. The next card is the first multicolored card in my rankings, and these cards are all significantly more powerful than most of the single colored uncommons. However, they're not as high in my rankings because it is more difficult to first pick them. I am of the view in draft that you would like to take one of the powerful uncommons if there are no multicolored uncommons, if there are no powerful single colored uncommons in the pack, or none of the really strong commons, just because it gives you the upside that if you do land in those colors, you are going to have a really powerful card. Whereas if you draft a less powerful card in a single color, there's still no guarantee that you will play it. And if you do get to play it, the payoff isn't as high. So Mirror Shield Hoplite is red and a white for a Vigilance 2/2. And whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a backup ability, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now, backup is an ability where a creature comes in, and if it has, say, backup 1, it can put a +1/+1 counter on itself or another creature, and then the creature that it puts the +1/+1 counter on, if it's not itself, gets the rest of the abilities that it has. So Mirror Shield Hoplite effectively doubles each of these backup abilities. So you could play Mirror Shield Hoplite, play a 3-mana creature with backup, target the Hoplite with the backup ability, and then it would trigger again, and you could target the 3-drop with the triggered ability. So you're effectively doubling the backup on every single creature that you play the first time you play one each turn. And red-white has a lot of creatures in backup, which I think will make this card an extremely strong engine for that deck. And the fact that it has Vigilance means it's a fantastic place to put +1/+1 counters on as well. I think this card will be very strong. If you first pick it, you should be leaning towards the red-white deck. Coming in at number 6 is Norns Inquisitor, which is 1 and a white for a Phyrexian Knight 1/1. And when it enters the battlefield, you incubate 2. So you create a token with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can pay 2 to transform it into a 0/0 Phyrexian artifact creature. So you effectively get a 2/2 for 2 additional mana. And whenever a permanent you control transforms into a Phyrexian, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So Norns Inquisitor isn't as powerful as as the Hoplite. It doesn't have the same upside. However, it does mean that on turn 2, you'll get a 1/1, you'll incubate, and on turn 3, if this thing's still around, you'll get a 3/3. But if they've killed it, they've used one card to kill the Inquisitor, and you still get your 2/2. This card reminds me a lot of Blade Splicer, which is a really powerful rare in the original Mirrodin block. However, it also has the upside that if you have lots of other cards with Incubate, you're going to be able to transform them all and get additional +1/+1 counters on it. Additionally, there are also other cards in the set which transform into Phyrexian, which means that this card will be putting a lot of +1/+1 counters on a lot of creatures, and it does have quite a high upside. So if you take this first, I think you could look to go into white-black Phyrexians, or just a white deck that places an emphasis on drafting a lot of Phyrexians as well. It's also worth noting that it is a knight, so it can go in the blue-white Phyrexian, the blue-white knight deck as well. But coming in at number 5 is Marshal of Zalfia, another knight, and this is the blue-white Knight Lord. It's blue and a white for a 2/2 human knight, and other knights you control get +1/+1. Then it has white-blue tap another target creature. This is a really strong card, and a lot of the commons and uncommons in blue and white are knight creature types. If you manage to curve this into a 3-drop, and then there's a 4-drop common that creates 2/2 knight bodies, then you're going to quickly have a lot of power and toughness, and this is going to buff your whole team and make it very difficult for your opponent to block. It's also worth noting that a lot of the knights have Vigilance, which means you'll be able to take advantage of the additional power and toughness on offense and defense, which is really important with the battles being in the set. Coming in at number 4 is Tandem Takedown. This is 1 green for an instant. Up to 2 target creatures you control each get +1/+0 until end of turn. They each deal damage equal to their power to another target creature, planeswalker, or battle. Now this card doesn't have the upside of some of the other cards that we've looked at already. However, green does not have access to much removal. There is a common green bite spell similar to this. However, it's only 1 creature you control and has more capacity for it to be blown out if your opponent removes your 1 creature in response to this. Whereas Tandem Takedown has 2 target creatures dealing the damage. So if your opponent kills one of them, the other creature will still deal the damage. And green has quite a few big bodies, which means that hopefully both of your creatures would individually be able to take down whatever creature, planeswalker, or battle you're hoping to kill. The reason this is slightly higher than some of the other removal spells is because green doesn't get access to this type of effect often, which makes it more of a unique effect in green decks, and therefore something you need to take higher if you're going to be in those decks to make sure you have access to the interaction you need to win draft. And this is particularly true in this format where there are quite a few bombs, and you're going to need to be able to deal with things, particularly at instant speed. Coming in at number 3 is another green card, and this is the green-white uncommon. It's Botanical Brawler, and it's a 0/0 elemental warrior with trample, and it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It then also has the ability that whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on another permanent you control, if it's the first time +1/+1 counters have been put on that permanent this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Botanical Brawler. So similar to the Hoplite, this is targeting backup decks, in that every time your creature with backup comes in and puts a +1/+1 counter on any creature other than Botanical Brawler will also get the counter. There are also many other cards that give multiple +1/+1 counters to different creatures, and it's possible to have a deck with a large number of cards that trigger this. And if you play one on turn 3 and then turn 4, all of a sudden your 2-drop is a 4/4 trample, which just hits really hard. And if this thing is in multiples, it actually combos in that the Botanical Brawler will trigger both of them off of the backup creature, and then they will each see each other receiving a +1/+1 counter for the first time, and then they will get an additional +1/+1 counter each off new triggers. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm keen to see this card work in multiples on Arena and quickly combo people out with an extremely aggressive green-white deck. Coming in at number 2 is a standard removal spell in white. It's Seal from Existence. It's 1/1 white for a enchantment with Ward 3. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Seal from Existence leaves the battlefield. This is essentially just Oblivion Ring, however it also has the ability that your opponent is going to have to pay an additional 3 mana if they want to try and kill the Oblivion Ring and get that permanent back. There are a lot of different types of bombs in this set, and I think that the flexibility of Seal from Existence to be able to take anything out will make it extremely powerful in this format as a catch-all, answer-all. It's also very efficient, and ideally when you play this on, say, turn 6, you can follow up with another creature or spell to get a tempo advantage. While it may not have the upside of some of the multicolored uncommons, the fact that it's single-colored and answers everything makes it a little bit more appealing for me as a pack 1, pick 1. And finally, my number 1 uncommon to pack 1, pick 1 in the set is Stoke the Flames. It's 2 red for an instant with Convoke, and it deals 4 damage to any target. We've seen this uncommon before in M15, where it was one of the best uncommons in the set. It's extremely efficient removal, it's instant speed, and it has Convoke, which, as we've discussed before, allows you to play this when you don't have mana up and surprise your opponent with it. The other upside that this has is that it can go to the opponent's face, which means that in an aggressive red deck, if you've dealt 16 damage, you can simply cast this to kill your opponent. That situation won't come up super often, but it's an additional piece of flexibility that your opponent will have to worry about and is a relevant upside, and part of the reason why I have this pack 1, pick 1 for me and my number 1 uncommon in the set before it has released on Arena. But if there's a card that you think should be number 1 or even on this list, let me know in the comments below which uncommons you think should be top 10, and if you have a different pick for the number 1 uncommon in the set, I'll happily discuss them below in the comments, and hopefully we can come up with a new top 10 listing a few weeks after the set has been released. As always, thanks for watching, and be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for additional content going forward.